First thing that we are going to see today is timer. Okay, so why do we need a timer, and in what scenarios we need a timer? So we'll discuss on that. Now, timer is basically, like I said you guys when we discussed, timer is mainly to avoid uh, for creating something. Say for example, there is an instance which I created today. Okay, so today is 21st of October. I created one instance, and the due date to complete this instance maybe is say 21st of November. That is 30 days from now. Now, what would happen after 30 days? If we don't complete the instance will still be active. Maybe there are some tasks which are still not completed by the users. They are also active, right? And as a result, maybe after 2 3 months, I can consider this instance, or I can consider those tasks as orphan tasks, right? We discussed this several times. I mean, regarding orphan tokens, orphan task, we discussed several times. So if I have a task which needs to be completed by say maybe in within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that's my due date. And if I don't complete that, then that instance and task will still be active and will be there on the server, which is not correct. So to avoid this, there is a component which we can use, which we call as a timer. Timer is added to implement escalation on any task. Say for example, there is a process, say leave application. Okay. Now say we have say Noor. Say Noor is an employee and he applies for a leave. Okay. And his manager is say Srinidhi. Now she has to approve that leave maybe within 1 week. By the time Noor has applied the leave today, and she has to approve the leave within 7 days. But somehow she did not approve the leave and the task is still active. So what we do using the timer, I can do multiple things using a timer. I can send an email to Srinidhi, an escalation email saying that the task is still active. Please go and complete this task. I can auto complete the entire instance. If I don't want the instance to be active, if I see that the instance is active for more than 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and nobody is working on that, I don't have to go manually to the process inspector and complete it. I can do it using a timer, which is an automated thing, right? So we'll see the implementation. We'll understand the timer first, and I'll show you an implementation how this can be auto completed, how an entire instance can be auto completed if it doesn't get completed within a due date. Okay, so if you guys can see my screen, this is a very simple process. I mean, there's nothing in the process. We have a start event and we have an end event. And now from the right hand side, I am going to drag a user task on this lane. Okay, now I will connect all the sequence flows in this way. And now if I have to implement a timer, so this is my user task. Say this user task, say we should be completing this user task, say within say 1 week, or maybe within say 2 days. But somehow if it doesn't get completed, I want to complete the instance. My target is to complete the entire instance if the due date has crossed. Okay, so how I can do it? I have to implement a timer. I have to add a timer on top of this user task. How I can do it? On the right hand side, guys, there is something called intermediate event, right? We saw this yesterday and day before. And in this intermediate event, there is one component called timer. So this component I have to drag on top, sorry, on top of the user task. Okay, that's how. So you are dragging this timer and I am just releasing it, going on top of this user task. And whenever you do that, the timer gets attached on the boundary of this user task. Okay, now let's see what are the different properties of this timer which we need to understand, and accordingly we can define or we can implement it in this process. So like I said, you guys, always if I have to find out the properties of a component in IBM BPM, you have to select that component and you have to come down to the properties. So right now this timer is selected and the properties also are visible over here. So this is the main property of the timer which you guys have to configure. Okay. So what is the first one? Interrupt activity. Interrupt activity always needs to be enabled. What is this interrupt activity? Again, the same thing. If I want to implement a timer in a way that this user task, which was supposed to be completed within a specific time, but that doesn't get completed, then this timer will interrupt this activity. The timer will interrupt this activity and it will take a separate sequence flow. What kind of sequence flow I can add? Let me add a very simple sequence flow. From this timer, I can connect it to the end event. Okay. So we cannot connect. So I have to do it in the different way. That is, I need to add, say, a script. Okay. So this script, what it will do, I can add some log over here. I'll show you how to add a log today. And then this script, I can connect it to the end event. So I cannot connect a sequence flow directly from the timer to the end event. So I'm adding a script task and you can see where I have added this in the system lane. And in the script task, I will just change the name. Log timer activity. So this script will have a log, which I will show you. I'm going to write that statement over here. And this script will print the log that the timer was fired, and then it will straight away go to the end event. Before going into the properties, let's understand this diagram. Here we have a user task. Whenever I will run this process, this user task, this process will be triggered, an instance will be created. And along with that, a task will also be created for this user task. Now I will configure this timer in a way that, say, if within 3 days this user task is not completed, it will come here, it will take this path, it will log the timer activity, and it will complete the instance. Okay, so as a result, basically I am adding an SLA. I am adding an extra time that I will wait for another 3 days till the time someone really comes and completes this user task, and I can complete this entire process. I'll give you another example of this implementation. Here, instead of adding a script, I can also add an email activity, an email notification. So if this user task needs to be completed by, say, a set of employees, if they are not completing within a specific time, from this timer, I will come here to the system task. Here I can write some code for the email, and that email will be triggered, and then it will complete this activity or the entire instance. Okay, just notifying that you did not complete this within this specific time, so we are completing this process. Okay, so this way we can implement a timer. Now let's understand the properties of this timer. So first one says interrupt activity, which is enabled. It should always be enabled, otherwise your timer will not work. As simple as that. It should always be enabled. What does it mean, interrupt activity? It is basically trying to say that you are configuring this timer. Do you really want this timer to interrupt this user task? Yes, I want to. If it doesn't get completed within a specific time, then this timer should interrupt this activity. Okay. Repeatable. Repeatable is what it says, the boundary event can be triggered more than once when the timer is set to repeatable. It triggers each time the specified interval elapses until this activity is reached. So right now I can see this is disabled. The repeatable is disabled. Ideally, if you're implementing a timer on a user task for only one single instance, this timer should not repeat. Ideally, it should not. So that's the reason it is disabled. But yes, say again I create a new instance, again this timer will work for that. But for a single case, this timer should not be repeatable. That's the reason it is disabled at the moment. Okay. Now comes the most important thing over here, event properties. First says trigger on. Now there are different options over here. It is up to you. It is up to the requirement how you define this options over here. What is the first one? After start of step. Whatever I discussed till now, this is the option which I was talking about. Say this instance is created. Say this process has been triggered. An instance is created. This user task has been triggered. A task is active right now, say for some employees. Now I define my timer in a way that after this user task is active, and if it is active for till a specific time, say 2 hours or say maybe 2 days or 3 days, then this timer will be active and the timer will take me through the other sequence flow which I have added over here. Okay, so this is my after start of step. Ideally, the example which I'm giving you till now, and even if I go to my project and see, this option is selected after start of step. If you don't want to use this, if you have a predefined due date, so for that you have all these options. Before due date, say there is a due date. So today is 21st of October. Now, if I trigger this process, say the due date is 22nd of October, that is tomorrow. So if I select before due date, then in that case, definitely I have to select. So before due date means due date where it comes over here, you see due in 8 hours. So we can define the due date over here. Okay, so 8 hours is the due date. So I'll make it say 24 hours. Okay, so now if I trigger this instance right now it's almost like 9 a.m. So tomorrow 9 a.m. By tomorrow 9 a.m. I have to complete this instance. I have to complete the task. Now, if in case I do not complete the task within 24 hours, then in that case, this timer will be triggered. When it will be triggered, here you can define this time over here. Okay, so here, before or after difference, say here I define, say 2. And what is this on the right hand side? Hours is mentioned, right? So it means, say tomorrow 9 a.m. is the due date, 22nd of October, 9 a.m. is my due date. So around 7 a.m. this timer will be triggered. Before or after difference. Before this due date reaches at around 9 a.m. tomorrow, around 7 a.m. this timer will be triggered and it will take you to the path which we have defined over here, to this lock timer activity. Okay. Did we understand? Any confusion here, guys? Any confusion till now? We are good. Okay. So before due date, we understood. Similarly, we have after due date, which means again,
Rahul,
yes.
can you repeat the after start of step?
Yeah. After start of step is the most simple one. So after start of step means this is a step. Okay. Whatever guys, whatever activities you are adding in a process, be it a user activity, be it a system activity, be it a script. Okay. Whatever I am adding, each of these activities are considered as step in the process. Okay. In our leave application, if you remember, we had added employee activity and manager activity. So for that process, we have two steps. Similarly, if you see this process, we have only one activity, which means it has only one step. For your mobile application, which you guys designed, there were three activities, which means it has three steps, right? So here on the top of this activity, I have added a timer. Now here I have selected after start of step, which means whenever this activity will be triggered, say it gets triggered today, say around 9 a.m., then after 2 hours, this timer will be triggered. Okay, and it will take that path which we have defined over here. It will not take this happy path. This is not even an exception path, but it will take this path and it will move in this way and complete the instance. Okay, we understood after start of step.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Now this after start of step, which I was telling you guys, this is majorly used in projects because we have something called SLA. Okay, that is by a specific time, I have to complete this process. I cannot keep this process active for the entire life. I cannot do that. I need to complete the process within a specific time. That's the reason we have due date and all these things. Okay. Now, what is the second one? Before due date. Everybody understood before due date? So again, I'll explain. Say this process has a due date of 24 hours, right? So today, if I trigger this process around 9 a.m., that is on 21st of October, I am triggering this process at 9 a.m. So 24 hours means by tomorrow 9 a.m. I have to complete this process. Now I have selected before due date and I am adding here 2 hours, which means before the due date reaches around 7 a.m., this timer will be triggered and it will take this path. Understood? Okay. Now you guys might be thinking that what is tolerance interval then? Here also we can define the time. Now this is an additional time you want to give. Say here you have given 2, then again if I give here 2, which means after 2 hours definitely uh, we are we want to trigger this timer, but since I'm adding another 2, which means it will now wait for total 4 hours. Generally we keep this as 0. Ideally we always keep this as 0. We don't add anything in the tolerance interval. But if you still want to add more, by this you are actually trying to say to your manager that hey, I have added so much of time, but still the people did not complete those tasks. It's a kind of escalation that you are adding over here. Okay, so ideally we keep this as 0, but in generally this one is the most important and we define here as whatever time you want to define. If you see on the right hand side, guys, here you have days, hours and minutes. So if I mention here days, it means 2 days. Similarly, I can mention here hours or minutes. Okay, same for your tolerance interval also, you have days, hours and minutes. This is an additional value that you are adding after this time. So this time is main important. It will wait till say 2 days. Additionally, I am adding say 1 hour or 2 hours, which means after 2 days, again it will wait for another 2 hours. Okay. So if you see in different projects, you will see this is always 0. Okay. If you want to add more, you can add more over here. After due date is just the opposite. So again, 9 a.m. 21st of October, I am triggering this process. 24 hours is my due date. So tomorrow 9 a.m. is the due date. So after due date is reached, it will wait till 11 a.m. Then this timer will be triggered and whatever activity I've added for the timer, that will be done. That will be completed. Okay. Here is my before due date and after due date. Next comes custom date. Custom date, guys, you can define your own custom date. Say tomorrow is your due date, 22nd of October. Now you want to define your own kind of custom date. Say 25th of October. That I can define over here. But in case if I'm selecting this, then I have to define this custom date over here, guys. Okay. So here, if I select before custom date, if you see, if I select any other value, say after due date or before due date or after start of step, then in that case, this custom date is disabled. You see, we cannot do anything over here. But as soon as I select before custom date or after custom date, this value gets enabled and I can define a date over here. Defining a date can be done in several ways. I can specify the date over here using some JavaScript expression. If you guys are not aware of JavaScript expression, not a problem. You can also map a variable over here. You see, here there is an option of adding a variable. So what you can do, what is the best thing you can do? Add an EPV expose process, or not an EPV. I would say you can add a variable, and in that variable, say I can do in this way. Let's say my due date is say 22nd of October. Then I can say add some more, say around 5 days more. Okay, guys, please go on mute if you don't have questions. If you have questions, you can speak, but please go on mute if you don't have. Yeah. So here I can add, say a private variable. Okay. And in that private variable, I can specify the date, and that date I can map it over here, because there is an option that you can map a variable over here. Okay. So custom date is also simple. And similarly, we have after custom date, just like before due date and after due date. Similarly, we have before custom date and after custom date. So accordingly, if you define the custom date, then according to your requirement, you can select any one of them. Okay. So we'll see one implementation right now. So I will select after start of step. Okay. And here instead of 2 days, I will select 2 minutes. Okay. And then I will save this. Okay. Now the last one, what it says, use the activity work schedule. Limits the timer activity to the period specified in the activity work schedule property. If no work schedule is specified for the activity, the process work schedule is used. Selecting this option has no effect if the timer use activity schedule option is set on the process server. Period specified in the activity schedule specified. Okay, what is this if I enable this one? Okay, I have to go and find out this one. I have never used this activity work schedule. Check in your BAW if you see this option. Okay, I believe this option is there, but still check once in your BAW whenever you guys will be implementing this one. But yes, I'll find out what exactly this is and I'll come back. As far as I know that in my project we are not using this, it is disabled, but I'll still come back with an answer like what exactly this thing defines. Okay, because it has got something with the process server, so might be we might have to configure something in the process server or not. That I'll go back and I'll check. Okay, so this is how you need to implement it, and I will just check few things. So we have this default UI human service, and here also. Okay. Okay, let me save it. Let us see whether our timer is working properly or not. Okay. And before that, I will add a log. Let me show you how to add a log in IBM BPM. So any kind of application log, if you want to define any kind of log, then in that case, you can write in this way, log.info. In brackets, I can mention, say, timer is. See, there are different projects, and each project they define logger in their own way. So in few cases, you will see if you're using some application logger, there is something called Splunk. Okay. There are several different logger techniques are there. There is Splunk is there. Then we have our system logs are there in IBM BPM, where we can go to the VAS admin console and we can see the logs over there. Okay. Ideally, we go for application logger. Like I can say in two of my projects, we use Splunk. Splunk is a very secure logger mechanism, and through Splunk we can define the log. So there the definition is different. So right now we are using log.info, which is the by default BPM logging. That's how we log in BPM. But if I'm using some external logger, say some Splunk is not part of BPM. It's an external thing. That time the logging will be different. That time we use BPM app logger.info. Okay, so different techniques are there for different logging mechanism. Log.info I'm showing you, this is the by default logger system. Okay, this is a by default BPM logger system which I'm using. So what will happen whenever the timer will be triggered, it will take this path, it will log this thing, okay, whatever I have written here, and then it will complete the instance. Okay, so let's see whether this thing will work. So I'm going to trigger this process now, and I will wait for 2 minutes. So 103 is the instance. I can see it is triggered. You can see token on top of both user activity as well as timer, right? So let's wait for 2 minutes and see whether this timer is getting triggered or not. So 9:05 is the time when we actually triggered this process. Any questions, guys, till now? Whatever options we saw. So now what is happening? This user task is active. Nobody is working on the task. Now after 2 minutes, this timer should trigger itself and it should take the other path to the end event. Okay, that's what the implementation is. So hopefully at 9:07, this should move to the end event through the timer. Now, just it will take time, maybe another 1 minute. Now, before we move, before we see the implementation, uh, this time which I have defined here, guys, I just forgot to mention this time which I have defined, right? 2 hours or 2 minutes. Ideally, we use an EPV over here. We create an EPV, an expose process variable, and over there we define the time, and that EPV we map over here. We can map it easily because you see here we have this variable picker which we can map over here, because tomorrow if the customer comes to you or the client comes to you and tells you that, hey, whatever uh, time you have added, the extra time that you've added for the activity, that needs to be changed. So we can easily change it from which console, from which component we can change the EPV value. From which component of IBM BPM we can change the EPV value, guys?
Process admin console.
Process admin console. Correct. So from there, we can define an EPV. We can change the value of an EPV, and accordingly, whatever value we are changing, that will be reflected over here. Okay, guys. Now you can see I just refresh the instance, and we can see the instance has been completed. Okay, 2 minutes was over, and then the timer took this path, it logged something, and then it went to the end event. Now I am adding logs. There can be several things you can do over here. Unfortunately, we don't have an SMTP server. If we had an SMTP server, then I can define an email activity over here, which will send an email, an escalation email to those users who did not complete this task within the specified time. The main reason of using a timer, guys, is two. One, I don't want to keep this instance active for long time. And second, I want to add some escalation on the process layer. Okay, so if someone asks you tomorrow that why do we need to use a timer, we have these 2 points to answer. Okay, so that's the reason we use a timer. Very simple. It is not at all complicated. Yes, there is one option which I would go back and see why we use this one. Okay, and I'll come back with an answer by tomorrow. Okay, apart from this, these things are the most important, and please consider all these things whenever you are defining a timer in your project. But before you define this time, discuss with your architect, designer, because they would have the information, because this time is actually discussed with the customer or the client, and then only we define it over here. In our scenario, in my project, our timer is 12400 hours. Okay, like this we define. So this we define in an EPV, which we change it from the process admin. Similarly, for your case also, define an EPV and you can map it over here. Okay, if you want to see how we can define an EPV, I can show you. So quickly I can show you. So here I will go to data. I will create expose process. So I will give a name, say expiration time. Click on finish. Going inside, add a parameter, say minutes. And here, just go down where you can define the default value. I will leave, okay, because we are using 2 minutes right now. And here, guys, always enable this option. If I don't enable this option, what will happen? Okay, let me ask someone. Wait, don't give any answer. Farid Ahmed. Farid, are you there? Okay. We'll go to Muthu Lakshmi.
Yes, Rahul.
What happens if I don't enable this checkbox for an EPV? The last one, use new values.
Mm, it will not accept any values over there, any new values we are assigning for minutes.
Okay, very close.
Hi Rahul. You cannot change the EPV if I mean, since it is a static one, you cannot use the new values again if you select that.
So basically, if I don't enable this, I cannot add again new values from process admin if I want to. In future, if I want to change this value from 2 to 4, then I cannot do it from the process admin. So if you want to add that thing that I can change the value of an EPV at any point of time from process admin, we always need to enable this. Okay, so what will happen? If there were tasks already created, which was getting the value 2, now whenever you change the value from the process admin, the existing task now will get the new value, whatever I'm updating from the process admin. Okay, so always we should enable this checkbox. Okay, so here I have defined this EPV, guys. Now, if I want to use this EPV in my process, the first thing is we have to come in the variables. I have to link this EPV. After linking this EPV, then I can come here and I can use the variable picker, or if it's not coming, then in that case, I can do it in this way. tw dot EPV expiration time dot minutes. And additionally, like I said you guys, here, although it's not required, but yes, if you want, you can define in this way also. Just to make sure whatever I am adding, this value gets converted into an integer. Okay, it's an optional thing. So for a timer, it never gives you an error. But yes, if you're writing some kind of code, okay, based on the EPV, always try to convert it into string or integer, whatever value you want to define. Okay, we discussed this before also. Like whenever I'm using an EPV, we generally add a string before the EPV value. The reason being, we have seen this several times that the code fails because BPM is not able to understand what value exactly it is, whether it's a string or an integer or something else. It does not understand. That's the reason, to make it understand, we add either integer. If it's an integer value, we add an integer before. If it's a string value, we add a string before. Kind of concasting we do. Okay. So it's an optional thing over here. You can add or you can ignore it. But that's how, guys, you have to define the EPV. We can add an EPV in this way. And ideally, we should always use an EPV over here. Okay. All right. Now, okay. So everybody understood timer? Any questions on timer?